Kate Furbish, friends. Today is our last Outdoor Explorer video for the year. And we're going to do something that actually relates to Kate Furbish, the woman who your school is named after. Kate Furbish was a famous botanist, a plant scientist. What we're going to do today for our activity in honor of Kate Furbish is to go outside and go on a flower search. So we're going to find as many different kinds of flowers as we can. And Kate Furbish would have loved this activity. It's actually what she spent a lot of her life doing. She hiked thousands of miles around the entire state of Maine and collected plants everywhere she went. So today on our flower search, we might get like 5 different kinds or 6 different kinds. Kate Furbish collected 4,000 different kinds of flowers that were growing all around Maine. And then she came back to her house and painted watercolors of each of the plants. Do you see in this picture of her room, do you see the easel, the artist's easel? So she would sketch amazing drawings with a pencil in the field, but then she'd come back home and add watercolors to her drawings. And if you've ever painted a flower before, you know how hard it can be. So these are all paintings that she made of different flowers that she found growing around Maine. And her drawings were so good that guess what? Even right now, 150 years later, scientists still use Kate Furbish's drawings to notice details about different plants in Maine. So when you go outside with your grown-up, you're going to be on the search, looking high, low, and everywhere for different kinds of flowers. Flowers can be different colors, they can be different sizes. Some grow on a bush, some grow on the ground, all different kinds of flowers. I love seeing if I can make a rainbow of all different colors of plants, of flowers that I find. You can also notice that different flowers have different numbers of petals. The petals on a flower, sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 4, there's different numbers. Flowers come in all different shapes, and you're going to find some pretty crazy ones once you start looking up close. So for the activity, you and your grown-up should wander around and collect a few different flowers. And we're going to do what's called put them in a plant press. So we're going to press the flowers, they get nice and flat, and that way they stay a longer time, and you'll actually be able to make like a card or a little art decoration out of your flowers. And if you want, you can also try painting your flowers, just like Kate Furbish did. Now, very important, all you need for this day is a grown-up. And this is really important because before you can pick flowers, it's very important to talk to your grown-up about which flowers are okay to pick. One rule of thumb is if there's only one of the flowers, don't pick it, because that means it's really, pretty special and rare, and there's not tons of them. But if you come up upon a field where there's a whole bunch of the same kind of flowers, you can pick one of those for sure, because there's tons more left. But you just don't want to pick one if there's not very many around. So it's pretty simple. All you do is you go, and once you've agreed that it's an okay flower to pick, you pick the flower, and you might get a couple while you're out. And another kind. And you can even press leaves. If you see some leaves that are a fun shape, I found these leaves. These are really neat. I want to see what these look like if I press them. And after you've got a collection, head inside and I'll show you how to make a plant press. All right, so we're going to take our flowers and our leaves and put them into a plant press. And there's 2 kinds of plant presses. There's the fancy kind there's a really fancy kind. But there's the fancy kind you can make where you take 2 pieces of wood and then in between you just have layers of cardboard and newspaper. Cardboard, newspaper. Or there's the kind that sometimes my kids do when they're in a hurry. A dictionary or any other big heavy book. Open it up to a page and you put in some newspaper. A folded piece of newspaper. And if you look inside, look what we already have here. So this is a beautiful tulip petal that we found earlier in the year and we put in here. And here's some other flowers, and they get nice and flat. So do you see how they get nice and flat, and you can still see the shape of the flower, and they're all different, so it's really neat. So pressing flowers is pretty simple. All you do, we're gonna add to this collection, is take your newspaper, take your plant, and we'll start with a flower here. You actually press them upside down. So you wanna take this flower, turn it upside down, and push it down very gently onto the newspaper. You have to kind of flatten its stem a little bit. Same thing, I'm gonna take our next flower, upside down. You can actually rip off part of the stem if it's too long. Upside down onto the newspaper. And last but not least, our leaves, because they're such a cool shape. And when you press these, you're gonna have to work with your fingers to lay them down so they're nice and flattened out in just the shape you want them. And then, this is the hard part. Take your newspaper flap and you slowly fold it down on top of those flowers, making sure that they're in a good position. Then you just close the dictionary right on top, and the heavy dictionary will flatten out those flowers. It'll take a few days. That tulip petal that I showed you, that hadn't been in there actually, I think 2 weeks. So you just leave it right like this and it'll get nice and flat. So after a few days, you can check and see how things are doing. Eventually, your flowers will get nice and flat and dry, and they'll be ready for your project. So here's how to do it. All you need for this project is your nice, dry, flat flowers that you pressed in your dictionary, and you need a paintbrush and some nice watery glue. Not just normal glue, you need a couple drops of water in your glue to make it watery. And then you use your paintbrush to get that watery glue all over your paper. So you cover your paper in watery glue, and then put your flower petal down, so it kind of sticks there. And then, don't forget this part, cover the flower with more glue. It feels a little weird to paint glue on top of a flower, but it'll really help. So it's glue, flower, glue. Glue, flower, glue. You always put glue on the top. Then you just leave it out to dry for a while, and you've got yourself a note card. And if you have trouble finding flowers, just look for leaves instead. There's lots of different shapes and kinds of leaves, and those will work just as well. As long as it's something that you put in your dictionary in a few days until it's nice and flat, you can glue it on, just like I showed you. And look at this plant. This is a plant that Kate Furbish pressed over 150 years ago. So she did the same thing. She got it nice and flat and then put it on a page. So it's up to you. You could use your flower petals and maybe use some glue and put them on a card like this. Or you can even try painting like Kate Furbish did. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about Kate Furbish and why she's such an amazing person to have your school named after. She was such a curious and dedicated person who loved exploring Maine. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but do you know where she lived? She lived in Brunswick. So she grew up just like you, exploring the woods right here in Brunswick, Maine. And it's true that she was an amazing artist and drew incredible watercolors. And she even has a plant named after her that she discovered. But the thing that I think is most amazing about Kate Furbish is that she did all this on her own because she lived at a time in history when all the scientists in the world were men. It wasn't fair, but women weren't allowed to go to school to learn how to be a scientist. That's not fair. So she had to do it all on her own. She was determined, and she taught herself all about all the plants in Maine. And she would be so happy to know that now there are tons of women who are plant scientists, just like she loved. So go head outside and start your flower search. You never know what you're going to find. Have fun.